I'm Afra Raymond. Thank you for tuning to this latest episode in which we're going to be looking at the so-called political divide. A closer look at who is who and what is what. And maybe the political divide is so, but maybe it's not. Stay tuned. Forget the personalities for a second and ask yourself the question: what is the difference in the education policy between the one party and the other? What is the difference in the trading policy? Is there a difference in the energy policy? Is there a difference in policy terms substantively in our country? There is a particular way that the powers that be, in other words, the political rulers, are comfortable running the country. The first example I'd like to talk about goes back about 20 years to about 1996 and 1997, when the UNC government constructed the Piarco airport. It was embroiled in a lot of scandal, and in fact, the Piarco airport project was the subject of a commission of inquiry appointed by Mr. Patrick Manning, who was the Prime Minister at the time, in 2001. The Bernard Commission examined the various allegations of corruption in relation to the Piarco airport project. Its report was completed on the 30th of August 2003, and Mr. Manning gave statements shortly after to say the report was received, the contents were shocking, and in fact it would be published shortly and they were going to be looking at it, and so on and so on. And I could tell you, 6.5 years later, the report hadn't been published. Dr. Rowley was in the cabinet for a lot of those years. Mr. Imberty was in the cabinet too, you see. During the period I was president of JCC, we applied to have that report released under the Freedom of Information Act. And we were able to prove our case in terms of correspondence that the report was now liable to be published, because there's a 10-year rule which applies to cabinet documents that have been submitted to cabinet. That 10 years had passed and the report now needs to be published. But the burning question is this: one could understand how the UNC, or the People's Partnership for that matter, why they would be shy and or reluctant to publish a report that put them and their supporters in a bad light. But the actual behavior of the PNM in support of that action is absolutely mystifying. Unless you believe in a so-called political divide, like I am starting to, you see? And the PNM have been in power for a year now. The 10-year rule has been passed. Why haven't you published the Bernard report? Think on it. And there's another example with the off-report proceedings. The off-report was the result of a commission of inquiry into the public sector construction industry. And that was launched by Mr. Patrick Manning when he was Prime Minister. It was launched by Mr. Manning in 2008 in response to widespread complaints, mostly centering on UDCOT, and the golden boy at the time was a fellow called Caller Hart. Caller, I hope you're looking at this, because I have a few things to say. And the other thing is that that report was published in April 2010. It was a hard-hitting report, making a lot of recommendations, people to be investigated, people to be charged, and so on and so on. One of the innovations of often the way he conducted the Commission of Inquiry was that it was the first Commission of Inquiry that was conducted with a whole active website. So you could go to the website and get all the rules for the commission, all of the testimony was published, all of the transcripts were published. There was a live feed that one could click and see the proceedings taking place. The live feed didn't keep recordings, but one could follow, and it was a huge step forward. Very, very valuable for future generations of scholars in economics, government law, accounting, business management, engineering, architecture, planning, surveying, many, many interlocking fields of knowledge. 6 months after the People's Partnership won the election, that website disappeared. It went offline. And what was the logic behind it? Because again, let's pause and look at it. Let's try to measure the thing in terms of the so-called political divide. The projects under examination, the projects under criticism within the inquiry took place during the period of Mr. Manning's administration. Mr. Manning was a PNM Prime Minister. Mr. Caller Hart was a PNM operative. Okay? The report was lodged in and published in April of 2010. The election which the PNM lost was in May of 2010, and the People's Partnership came into power. So why then did the People's Partnership touch a button or fail to pay a subscription and cause the website to disappear? And I can tell you up to now, we've been unable to have that website restored. The other example I would give in closing is that we've had a very interesting discussion around, I think, FATCA. And that is one of those financial information acts that the American government is trying to put into force globally. On the one hand, we are told that the PNM produced this bill at the last minute. So the UNC is telling us that the PNM produced this bill at the last minute. And they were sort of ambushed. They were given it a few days before the parliamentary session. So the UNC couldn't decide. That was that point of view here. The PNM's response is that, in fact, the bill you're complaining about and the bill you're making all this noise about is exactly the same as what you approved in 2013, word for word. If this is a matter of the first importance for the country's financial stability and the whole future of the economy, why did we wait a year to bring it to Parliament? Given that the PNM won the election in September 2015, and we are now speaking on the 1st of October 2016, why did we have all of this conversation jumbled together in the second half of September 2016? What was the reason for waiting a year? If it was the same law, word for word, that was there from 2013, why did we wait a year? Is there a so-called political divide? I leave it to you to decide. Well, thank you for looking at that episode on the so-called political divide. You can follow the work on afraraymond.net. If you're interested in getting involved, you can join an organization like Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute or Companion Association Disclosure Today, or take part in an organization looking at the bigger structural question like the Constitution Reform Forum, which discusses how our nation's constitution can be changed for our benefit and the benefit of future generations. Thank you again for joining in. Feel free and share this information with your friends and your family. Thank you.